So, let us begin. Hello, dear guests, dear speakers, our experts. Welcome to Polygon, to Ljubljana, and thank you for coming. I have a feeling that this is going to be an interesting event and fruitful one. Because the debate we are intending to have here is it's going to be something a little bit further from what we until now envisaged as a discussion on basic income. Our first event in 2012, which we hosted, which was hosted by Institute Novum, was meant to introduce a concept of basic income and make us aware what is going on in Europe, in Southeast Europe, and a position of basic income model towards institutions of social state. That was for 2012, as we wrote it in our subtitle of the event, a kind of the out-box thinking. Now, after 6 years, I believe this is not out-of-the-box thinking anymore. Projects, discussions, publications, pilot projects are flourishing and popping up all around Europe. So my belief is that time for basic income has come, and that it's not only to discuss about pros and cons of basic income, but at this point we need to recognize that basic income is something to argue for. This is our basic policy stand. We are going to argue for basic income, and we don't really, we will leave the cons to others. Let them, after our discussion, come close and say, yeah, but basic income is something else. Our job today is to find better, maybe best possible ways how to persuade European Union or nation states to a path towards basic income. So we need to discuss a little bit about policies, but maybe even more about possible implementation. So this event here today is going to serve as a kind of an expert meeting. I will explain in more detail later on how this expert meeting will function, but before I do that, I would like to welcome today's all co-organizing partners. This event is co-organized by European Liberal Forum from Brussels, Institute Novum from Slovenia, UBI, so Unconditional Basic Income Europe, and the Slovenian section for basic income. So 4 partners, out of which 2 are expert groups on basic income, and we would like to hear what they have to say. And I'm really grateful that we have a representative here from at least 8 or 9 European countries, and Turkey as well. Hello, I really look forward to hear you explain later a little bit on how the idea is growing in Turkey. So thank you for coming. So for further ado, I would like to invite Felicita Medved, President of the Board of Institute Novum, to say a few remarks before we start. Please, Felicita.
Hvala, Sebastian. Spoštovane in spoštovani, dovolite, da vam zaželim dobro jutro. Ladies and gentlemen, dear liberal friends, friends of universal basic income, as well, I wish you a warm good morning and a warm welcome to this event on basic income for Europe, on behalf of Institute Novum and my own behalf. As Sebastian said 5 years ago, we had a conference on universal basic income, not just basic income, as is the title of today's discussion. At that time, it was not only thinking out of the box, but also a provocative idea for many. And as one of the speakers then said, Philippe van Parijs, one of the great thinkers on the matter, a very simple idea. But in the last 5 years, not being an expert on the issue, but having an opinion, I notice it is not such a simple idea, that people or different groups understand it in various ways. What has happened perhaps in these 5 years that it is really written much more about it than ever before, as Sebastian also mentioned. It has become a theme of a discussion of such forums as Davos, or maybe less transparent Bilderberg group. In some of European countries, we also have experiments on introduction or implementation on this idea on a smaller or larger scale. In Switzerland, there was a referendum, and even in my own country, Slovenia, there has been a first discussion in one of the committees of the National Assembly. So the idea is spreading and it is taking root in some way. But the question for me personally is if the implementation of basically simple and well-meant idea will be implemented in such a way, or will it, as many good ideas do, become corrupt in the process? So I hope that in this discussion today, arguing for the basic income, for persuading people and maybe politicians to think about it, we will have some answers to this question. I would like to mention also that for the last 4 years I've been presiding the European Liberal Forum, which consists of liberal think tanks all around the EU and even outside the EU. And recently, 2 months ago, even in the ALDE party, European Liberals Party, the universal basic income was one of the main topics, or the main topic, of the council held here in Ljubljana. So even in political circles where many people are not inclined or are even against the universal basic income is discussed. We also know that there was a European Citizens Initiative on the issue. It was very successful here in Slovenia, but on the whole, as you know, it did not succeed. And I have proposed again at that council that maybe we should think about initiating such an initiative again. So I wish us all a fruitful discussion and a nice gathering as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicita, for the words. Please, I would now like to invite Daniel Feher to give us some opening remarks in the behalf of UBI.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Thank you also, Felicita, for these opening remarks. As someone who is a historian by training and spent most of professional life in politics, I can tell you that in politics, change happens sometimes breathtakingly slowly, and that's sometimes surprisingly fast. And I think that's also what, just as you explained, what we see with basic income debates, with a little bit of exaggeration. I think like 5 years ago you could have probably fit all the basic income enthusiasts around Europe in a room like this. And that's more or less what we did in Brussels when people, many of them who are actually also sitting here today, came together and planned the first European Citizens Initiative on unconditional basic income, which then managed to convince 300,000 European citizens to support this idea, and has led to lots of initiatives. A great example here in Slovenia, a very active group, but also in other countries where basic income was not an issue at all before. Groups emerged working on this topic, and suddenly the discussion got in media. So I come from Hungary, there was also this the case. And then it led, after the ECI, these groups came together to start Unconditional Basic Income Europe as an organization, by historical coincidence also in this country, in Maribor. Our aim with Unconditional Basic Income Europe is to continue push this debate on national level, on European level, to help these groups to work together, to exchange information, see what works best and help each other. But it's also our intention to actually formulate policies for basic income. So I think we all know that unconditional basic income will not be introduced like by decree from one day to the other, but we need to go there step by step, and working on these policies that lead there is what we intend to do and what we will do here today. And then, of course, once we have the good ideas how to come to basic income, we also need to convince decision makers to implement this, and that's also why this is a great opportunity to work on these topics and then promote them to the decision makers in Europe and elsewhere. So to me, it only remains to say thanks a lot to Sebastian and Alia for organizing this event. Thanks also to Polygon to hosting us here, and wishing all of you a very fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Branko, will you say a few words in behalf of really few of Slovenian section for basic income?
This section was founded in 2010. It's not a new one. We have met. The first UBI conference was in Maribor. We were working with founding this UBIE, Unconditional Basic Income Europe group, and so I think we were very good implemented in the, how it's called, with Klaus and Udi were running this, signing the European civil, I don't know how to say, initiative for basic income in 2012, further in 2013, and well, I think that Slovenia were very good in signing, in collecting these signatures. After Bulgaria, we were on the second place. But I have to admit that we are little, in the last 2 years, because little sleeping, because there is not such an activism which was necessary in the few years. Now we should work on scientific researches, how to implement this in society. And it's another kind of work. So that we worked free with families, with jobs and so on. We should, I think not in Slovenia, but almost everywhere, we should have some people who are living who are paid for this, that these solutions will be found. And I'm sorry that our professor, Dr. Josef Minzinger, isn't present in this moment. He is a very well-known economist, and he says that economically there is no problem for implementing basic income maybe tomorrow. It's political. Politically is that this way. And then I think that how the decision, the people who make decisions, this is the discussion we have to lead to today, how these decisions will be forced. I think that's not the best word, but как се рече преpričati? Persuade that this is a really revolutionary and potentially good idea. I can't guarantee that it's good, but potentials are very good.
Thank you, Branko. So, and let us dive into the dangerous waters of this revolutionary idea now. A few technical informations before we start. There is a password for internet. There is a wireless internet here in the room, so you can. The password is here. Polygon 2014. So you can connect. The other is that we will be serving lunch later on outside, and the other, you can get some drinks here and coffee. You can actually, during the event, you can stand up and get it. So it's not so formal that you are forbidden to move. So if you are thirsty, because I can sense that it's going to be quite hot here, so get yourself something to drink. And one issue with the microphones. I've been told that microphones are on each table, but to be able to use it in a most efficient way, please try to get as close to the microphone where you are going to either open a discussion or just have a comment. So this is it. Alia, is there any other technical information? Everything is okay? Super, we are well on our way. So now, without further ado, I would like to invite, you can sit there, yeah, Dr. Igor Pribac to introduce us a little bit to the topic we are going to be discussing today. Once again, welcome everybody to be here.
Thank you for this honor, Sebastian, that I was chosen to inaugurate this today meeting, which it's coming in a, I would say, special time for the UB movement, at least the European one. I would say that this year could be labeled as a major breakthrough year for the idea. And yes, Sebastian and Felicita already mentioned some aspects of this breakthrough, but I would like to go a little bit more in detail. Not only all pilot projects have been or will be started this year, but the concept has managed to move much closer to the center of political debates in many national political realities in Europe. Big important parties or their prominent representatives have endorsed the idea in many countries through Europe. To say just few names, Benoît Hamon in France as a socialist presidential candidate, the Five-Star Movement in Italy, the Citizen Initiative of Pablo Iglesias in Spain, the Labour Party of Corbyn in the United Kingdom, and besides these political representatives, there are other very important names that I would say we should not overcome, not forget. There are enormously influential voices coming from the entrepreneurial sphere that are pushing for the idea, and they are coming from the cradle of the new technologies. People like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and I think also Zuckerberg were all standing back, saying that basic income is not something that is very a very desirable and very exigent concept that we should starve for, but it's a kind of unavoidable concept that is a response to the massive technological changes, social accommodation response to the massive technological changes in the productivity sector and the world labor market that are happening right now. All this put us, proponents and supporters of the basic income idea, in a new situation, which is also reflected in the agenda of today meeting. We are, as my predecessors are saying, we should not just describe or give general arguments about in support of the idea, but we should reflect in the much more detailed area of how to approach to the ideal which we are all sharing, the basic traits. This is an area that Philippe Van Parijs once described as a messy one, as a messy area. Basic idea, you cannot support the idea without being prepared to enter in a messy area where questions are not clear-cut, cannot be given clear-cut answers, and sometimes you have to go through difficult analysis that are difficult in my opinion because they combine in a complicated way normative thinking and descriptive thinking. Questions about values, justice, political philosophy in general, and questions that are dealt in the field of economy, political sociology. And well, it would be easy to say that you should just first argue on the normative level and then step down to the reality and choose between different descriptions which are most suitable for you. But in fact, the forecast about the effects of implementation of certain traits, aspects, characteristics of basic income can have so negative impacts on the society that are becoming undesirable. And these are also this kind of questioning of researching is also putting us to the core of today meeting concept. What is about implementing the basic income on the European level? Till this moment, in my view, the main discussion was going on national level, and I would say that there are national levels in Europe that are quite progressive and advanced in this aspect. Slovenia may be one of these advanced realities of Europe about the possibility of implementation. But on the other hand, there is not much happening on the European one. But one of the paradox about the alternative national level first or European level first is that if you ask people that are supporting the idea on the national level, they would typically agree that the implementation of the idea on the European level would be better than the implementation on the national level. But on the other hand, we don't have, as much as I know, any political European party that is strongly supporting the idea. The discussion on the European level is just starting, and it's far back in respect of the debate in the national level. So, what should be done about this paradox? What are the answers about the articulation about the push on the national and push on the European level? That is maybe the core of the today's debate, and I would, as introducer to this debate, stop here, in fact, and leave to your papers and your discussions, our common discussion, in fact, the area to intervene in and give some answer to this burning question of the moment for us, proponents of the basic income movement in Europe. Thank you.
Igor, thank you very much for this introduction to basic income. Now let us go towards our main part of the event. We will have in next 6 hours or a bit more 3 consecutive roundtables which are going to function as expert groups. So what does it mean to have an expert group? That means that there are going to be 3 short presentations as a kind of a food for thought. And after each of the presentations inside of the panel, afterwards there is going to be 20 minutes for a discussion. So we have a clear goal in front of us. We need to somehow think about and comment and between ourselves how best out of the short presentation, how to reach this idea on helping EU bureaucracy to engage with and maybe at the end even implement some aspects of basic income. So this is our clear goal. And the presentations will, as I said, serve as a food for thought, as a kind of a engager to be able to do that. Each panel will have its own moderator. A moderator is going to introduce the speakers, and later on, you will, when you want to speak, please raise your hand to the moderator to see you, so we can have this kind of a organized debate. As in a real parliament, you can either have open a new question or you can have a comment on the previous one. So a kind of in the parliament it is said, replicus to the open, reply to the open topic. So that we don't just jump from one to the other topic. So this is it. I will now invite Nina Šoštarić, who is going to chair our first panel, to introduce the speakers, and we'll start with the panel.
Right, thanks so much. So if everybody is ready to start and dive in, I'm delighted to introduce the first speaker, François Denis, who is doing a PhD in political science on the idea of European universal basic income at the universities of Warwick in the UK and Brussels in Belgium. He'll be talking about prospects for a European universal basic income.
Hello everyone, thank you for the invitation, I'm very happy to be here. The objective of my presentation is to present briefly to make an overview of the different arguments in favor of the idea of a European basic income, and to present maybe the routes and avenues for funding opportunities, and I will conclude with some remarks about the limits and prospects of the idea. The idea of a European basic income that I'm focusing on is not to have a full basic income at the European level replacing all the different welfare states, nor to have a basic income in each welfare state, but rather to have a social minimum that is jointly enacted between the national level and the European level. Whatever the welfare arrangements are on the national side, with a partial basic income funded at the European level on the other side. So it's in the same vein as Philip van Parijs's and Yannick van der Borg's idea of a euro dividend idea. So briefly, the different arguments I'm going to talk about here are of an economic kind, and then political and philosophical arguments as well. On the economic side, the arguments is that a partial basic income at the European level would provide some kind of systemic support that would help the different national welfare states in their fight against poverty and social exclusion, and find some way out of the pressure that is put on national redistribution within the European context, within European economic integration, which is putting pressure sometimes on national solidarity. It would, of course, have its biggest impact would be on the lowest disposable income, people with who are the least advantaged in society. One of the other arguments is that it would act as a demographic stabilizer, in the sense that it might reduce the push factors for migration in certain countries, avoid the brain drain in these countries, but it might also help those who are emigrating by giving them some kind of caution to manage with the difficulties of moving abroad in different linguistic, cultural and political contexts. It might also play the role of a macroeconomic stabilizer as a top-up of national macroeconomic stabilizers. Of course, the effect might not be as strong as some proposals which have been made, such as a European unemployment insurance scheme, which would act according to the economic conjectures, in this case, because it's a permanent idea, the effect might not be as strong, but it might still sustain demand and therefore provide some kind of stabilizing effect. Another argument that is put forward by Van Parijs is that it would act as, it would create a transfer union in the Eurozone and would help mitigate the pressure that are involved with the euro. We might discuss that later more at length, but I don't have time to go into the details of that argument. In terms of political arguments, it might also provide some output legitimacy, which is the legitimacy given by the material benefits that a policy, that citizens would feel thanks to a policy. Here the idea would be that the basic income would be very highly visible and would provide the image of a caring union to all the European citizens, therefore enhancing their support towards the European project. The idea of a euro dividend put forward by Van Parijs and Van der Bocht is also that it might be a way to redistribute wealth generated by economic integration in a more even manner than the current distribution of the material benefits of EU integration. There's also an argument put forward by Yuri Virov, a scholar from Oxford, saying that because of its unconditional nature, a partial European basic income might be a way to find support among both the intergovernmentalists and the federalists. The intergovernmentalists who value more national sovereignty, fair cooperation, domestic social justice might see it as a non-intrusive mechanism that might help social justice at the national level, whereas federalists might see it as a first step towards a European welfare state, maybe. Now, if we go to the different funding opportunities, a few numbers were brought up by Van Parijs recently in his last book. I will not go in the details of the assumptions that are behind all the different numbers, but for example, we can have a financial transaction tax which would yield only 10 euro per month per citizen, a carbon tax which might, depending on the assumptions, yield between 3 and 17 euros per month. A European progressive wealth tax is also something the Van Parijs and Van der Bocht are looking into, and it would yield an amount of 40 euros per month per citizen. A European corporate tax of 30%, an EU-wide corporate tax of 30% might yield 100 euro per month per citizen. In this case, it's very interesting as well because it might reduce also some of the pressure at the source, some of the pressure in terms of fiscal dumping and so on, which is already putting pressure on the national welfare states. But the idea they settle for is to fund the partial basic income with a European-wide VAT. The calculations they have put forward are that a VAT of 20% would yield an amount in average of 200 euros per month per citizen. Of course, if we then do age segmentation, it might be interesting to give different amounts to children, adults, and people over 65 or 70. If we focus only on on this population, for example, he showed that a VAT of 6% might yield a revenue of 500 euros per month for all Europeans over 70. A VAT of 1% might yield a revenue of 100 euros per month for all children below 10. And I will let Professor Menzinger also present his own proposal later, but you wrote a paper about a federation collecting 50% of VAT at EU level. Other sources remain to be explored, but ideas are a tax, for example, on fossil energy, on luxury goods, a reallocation of part of European funds, increase of budget contribution, money creation. Maybe Stan, who is the expert, will talk about this later or during the breaks. So there are, and we can always combine these different levies. For example, Yuri Virov has a euro dividend of 300 euros because he's combining EU-wide VAT with an EU corporate tax. Of course, this is economic perspective, but not really in terms of political feasibility, because we are maybe far from it to find an agreement, for example, for a European corporate tax. In terms of the redistributive effect, thanks to the great work of Stan and one of his friends, we could compile some redistribution at the macro level. And we can see that with Van Parijs's idea of a euro dividend, redistribution might be, well, the cost for net contributors might be, for example, for Germany, around 2%, and it might have, oh, sorry. Yes, there it is. You can see in blue the net contribution when it's according to without the purchasing power parity, and in red when it's according to purchasing power parity. And we have, for example, 2% for Germany, and huge effects for countries such as Romania, Bulgaria, or Greece. We can also imagine this at the Eurozone level. Here the effect of redistribution is less. It would be around 1.85% of the GNI for Germany, 1.2% if it's at purchasing power parity. Basically, the idea is that it would be a relatively modest cost for contributors and have huge effects for net beneficiaries. Of course, the effect of redistribution is much stronger if the amount is the same in every country, more modest but still implies a strong redistribution if it's according to purchasing power parity. We can always think of the idea by focusing on different age layers. For example, if we look at young people aged between 18 and 25, which are also a very strong part of what Guy Standing calls the precariat, it might be, the redistribution is much less, but it might be very interesting for this segment category. And we could also focus on children. Here the number is still 200 euros per month, but of course we can always vary the amount of the VAT at an EU level, or the amount of the amount of the euro dividend we want to give. And I will already conclude with a few remarks. I think for the first time in my life I was very efficient with time. So all this is, well, these arguments are nice, but they are very theoretical. So now what we need is much more research in terms of the potential effects that these proposals might have in terms of macroeconomic effects. To what extent can it play the role of a macroeconomic stabilizer? What would be the modalities of implementation? What would it require in terms of a treaty change? How would national tax and transfer be adjusted? What would be the other policies that should accompany a European basic income, so that it's not going to affect it's not going to be diminishing the standards at the national level. How would it affect inflation, aggregate demand, and so on? So we have to study its compatibility also with other proposals. Is it compatible, for example, with a European unemployment insurance scheme, with a framework directive for a European minimum income, which ensures that there's a sufficient level for minimum income in each national welfare state? This idea might still be far from being implemented at the European level because of limited interest, as Igor mentioned before, but it is growing, and the momentum for basic income is having ripple effect at the European level as well, and there are discussions about the basic income in the European Parliament. This idea of quantitative easing for the people is also much more visible now. Of course, we might need a stronger and a thicker civil society, transnational parties, in order to create this European demos, if we want, to support a European public sphere and develop this kind of ideas. I believe that with the debates around the European Pillar of Social Rights, we have an opportunity to put forward the idea of European basic income. It's interesting to see how, rather than falling back on the national level and have this idea that we should preserve social justice at the national level only, or go towards a European federal welfare state, this idea of having a combined welfare arrangements with different layers of welfare might be the way forward, and we should maybe recast the idea of a social Europe in multi-layered terms. Thank you.